Well, hello everybody, and my name is Nathan Eckel, and we are here with the Leadership SIG, which is part of ASTD Maryland. Want to welcome everyone who is here, and we have a really special program with you today. We have my friend Nathaniel Lake Jr. as our presenter here today. We're going to talk about 360-degree feedback. Nathaniel is the former Deputy Chief of Staff for the state of Michigan and has some extensive experience with delivering feedback in such a way that it is receivable and applicable for everybody. Before we go over to Nate, well, I'll say hi to Nate right now, let him introduce himself, and then I'll give some announcements, and then we'll go right back to things. Hi, Nate. How are you today?
All right. How you doing, Nathan? Hello, everyone. Welcome.
It's always good to be here. We're so glad that you're with us, and we're looking forward to what you're going to be sharing with us. So here's our agenda for today. Chris could not be on the line today because she's doing some training, but she's our president, and on behalf of her, welcome to the SIG. This SIG is really a resource within the ASTD Maryland chapter for leadership. What we do is we focus on WLP, workplace learning and performance issues in a collaborative community. And in the months to come, we're going to develop that community even more. There are a number of ways to get involved that I have not specified yet in writing, but suffice it to say, if you'd like to be involved, there are a number of different ways to be involved in the SIG to help produce this and also have some valuable experience with webinars becoming more and more popular as we move on with things. So we're going to go right off here to today's presentation with Nathaniel Lake, and then we're going to have some Q&A, and it looks like we will go ahead and get started with that. So I'm going to turn things over to you, Nathaniel, and make you the presenter once again.
All right. Thank you very much, Nathan. Joy to be here with you today. And I come to talk about feedback. And feedback comes in a lot of different forms. It's been said that public speaking is probably one of the greatest fears of the people. But I submit that probably a close second is providing and receiving feedback. For some reason or another, people have a hard time giving feedback and also preparing themselves to receive feedback. Well, in the state of Michigan, we did something that I thought was pretty novel. It was designed for the state of Michigan, but it all started back in 2003 when Governor Jennifer Granholm was sworn in as the governor of the state of Michigan. You see on the first slide, you'll see her picture there. She just recently released a book, co-authored it with her husband, Dan Mulhern, to talk about the economic woes of the state of Michigan and how the state of Michigan, as well as other states and companies, could move out of economic downturn and to move into a place where things are prosperous. So with Governor Granholm, one of the key pieces for her was she's very communicative. She likes to talk and meet with people and share her thoughts and feelings with them. Well, when she became the governor, she came into a situation that was just dismal. The budget was really bad. The previous administration had drained the rainy day fund, and it was just a matter of bad news after bad news after bad news. And so she wanted to figure out how can we turn the economy around in the state. And so what she did was went out, had a communication process set up to talk to members of the legislature, obviously, but also community groups, and got feedback from all of them. But things got worse before they got better. And most of her focus was externally focused. However, as you know, in any organization, you also have to have an internal focus. And so one of the things that we looked at was how can we get our employees involved in things that she was doing for the state of Michigan. One piece that we talked about was coming up with a set of values. How can we identify and connect with the governor and the mission of the state of Michigan? So we identified 4 values: values of integrity, values of excellence, customer focus, and we wanted to make sure that everyone had opportunity to be included. So it was a value of integrity, excellence, inclusion, and teamwork. We did this is we together a feedback mechanism we call Group of 200, where you heard of Malcolm Gladney's book, Tipping Point. He talked about the mavens and the connectors in the organization who are the ones who really get the word out to people. So we put together a group of 200, and we had a massive conference where all 200 of those individuals, a diagonal slice of the organization, came together to talk about the mission, visions, and the values, and to come up with a shared group of values for the state of Michigan. And that process started off and kicked off what we call our MI 360 process. Now, for the state of Michigan, we view feedback as a gift. So I ask all of you, what do you consider to be a gift? What is a gift? I don't know, Nate, how we communicate back and forth. Is it just matter of typing or what?
Yeah, all the above is fine. You can raise your hand or you can type into the chat window. If you can repeat the question again, Nathaniel.
Okay, so the question is, what is a gift? How do you view a gift? If someone gave you a gift, what would you view? How would you view that, and what would you do with it? Depends on if there's a strings attached. Good point. Okay. So you say it depends on if there are strings attached. If there were no strings attached, if it was just something that you wanted, somebody gave it to you freely, how would you view that? I don't know if people are hearing me or not.
Yeah, we're hearing you, Nathaniel. It just takes a couple of moments to type into the chat window. That's all. But I'll answer the question, at least for myself. I mean, I appreciate what was just said because, you know, in the business world, usually there are strings attached. So if there really isn't a string attached, that would be such a shock that it would take a little bit of time to get used to.
So I'm hearing that my audio is too soft. It's way softer than yours. So I have to do something to maybe try to increase the audio.
Yeah, I'll do that on my end.
Okay.
Thanks for the feedback on that. I'm just turning Nathaniel's voice up in the mixer a little bit.
So a gift is something that's voluntary, and it's something that is given as an endowment or an investment, and hopefully it's something that's given with careful thought, and it's something that's given with the intent of enriching the other person, the receiver. We view feedback in that same manner. We view feedback as a gift. Okay, why is feedback important? You get feedback from a lot of different sources. Sometimes you get noise in our radio or on our television. That's feedback. That tells us that we need to turn the volume down or we need to adjust the volume. But from a personal perspective, from a manager and an employee's perspective, it can open up the lines of communications. We need to know what's going on in the organization. It can also, in terms of your own self-awareness and your own self-development. With the state of Michigan, we do that as a means of making Michigan a great place to do great work. Now, Schwarzkopf says that for feedback and for competence and for things to happen and to get done, because I met a lot of leaders in the Army who were very competent. They knew what they wanted to do. They could do their jobs great. But he also met a lot of leaders who had some character. They had great integrity. And he said to lead in the 21st century, you have to have both. You have to have competence. You have to be able to do your job. But you also have to have integrity. And with us, we tie the competence and the integrity and the values together to come up with our 360 process. So what is the Michigan 360 process? When we talk about 360, you may have heard of John Maxwell, 360-degree leader. He talks about receiving and managing up, managing across, and managing down. So with the 360 process of receiving feedback from a number of different sources. Now, our process included the development of core competencies for our leaders. The 360 process was focused more on leaders than your day-to-day employee because, as John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls with leadership. We wanted to focus on our leadership. We needed to get things done externally with our economy, but we also knew that we had a workforce that was very downtrodden and dismayed because of cuts in benefits, layoffs, the economy turning bad. And so we needed to do something to get them on board and have them as part of the process. So the process and going out to them, they basically said the leaders were the problem as they could see it in terms of not communicating with them, not sharing with them, and they wanted a way to provide feedback, to the leadership. So the 360 process was developed. The first part of that process was to develop competencies, and we developed competencies. We had 15 core competencies that we developed. We took 5 of those and we focused on those. We focused on the competency of communications, building trust, facilitating change, developing a successful team, and leading through vision and values. So we took the competencies as well as the 4 shared values of integrity, excellence, inclusion, and teamwork, and we set up a process for feedback. Now, how does the 360 process work? As you see on the visual, the leader, that's the center of the core of the whole process. And the leader gets input from a variety of sources. Directly from their supervisor, this is typically the way that we provide feedback regarding performance. But also from others, from your peers, from your customers, from stakeholders, and then also from your direct reports. Now, this is something that a lot of organizations don't do. They have a formal process that allows that to occur. You see on this next slide, we developed 36 behavioral statements. And from those behavioral statements, we set up a rating scale from never to always or no opportunity to observe, because it's based on behaviors. It's based on observable behaviors. So an example question was, the leader accepts responsibility when it's wrong. As I indicated earlier, the process was tied both based on character and competence. The character dealt with the vision and the values. Now, what I didn't say to you is that we set up, right back in 2003, a process to get feedback from employees regarding how leaders are carrying out the values of the state of Michigan. So we conducted an online survey for 5 years in a row, getting feedback from our workforce on how the leaders were doing as it relates to living values of the state of Michigan. So based on that feedback, as well as the development of the competencies, we put together this 360 process. So this process deals with the character piece as well as with the competence of how an individual does his or her job. So if you see from this diagram, the vision and values impact the individual by supporting the organizational growth, by looking how the values are being carried out in the behaviors of that leader. And those values and those behaviors, just below that, supports the professional development of the leader. And I think that's the hallmark of the process that we set up, was having an organized way for that leader to get feedback, but also to do something with that feedback so they could be developed. Now, the feedback process goes like this. The leader solicits feedback from the multiple sources. They fill out the survey themselves first on the 36 behavioral statements. Then they send out electronically their 360 feedback, and they send it to, you can send it up to over 100 people. You know, the system was set up so that could occur. Obviously, the more people that respond, the better feedback that you get. So they received the feedback, and from receiving the feedback, they created action plans on what they were going to do with the feedback that they received. We encouraged the leaders to share their feedback, but that part was optional. And then at that point, they would build a professional development plan in selecting the key few behavioral statements that they wanted to improve. And then as a state, we provided them with a number of different tools and resources so they could apply that learning. Now, one of the tools that we set up is what we call a behavior in a box. But before I go into that, I just want to also mention to you that a hallmark of our process was the support that we gave the leaders. When they received the feedback, we didn't just get to them electronically. We actually set up debriefing sessions where we trained facilitators to go in and work with the individual leaders to help them understand and interpret information that they were receiving. The information was put in a sealed envelope and passed out at that debriefing session. And so we wanted to give support to that leader. And everything was done anonymously, again, as I said, through our electronic technology. And so, you know, people had a concern about, you know, who could see my results. And I'm not sure if I want all these other people doing these things, but the process worked from a security standpoint where once leaders realized that they were the only ones that could see the results, they felt more comfortable about that. So at the debrief session, we talked about, you know, how to interpret your information, and then we helped them set up an action plan as to what they were going to do with that material. So we provided some tools for them. And this slide here, Behaviors in a Box, was a tool that we set up to give them additional resources to develop their behaviors and improve their behaviors. We also developed 10 modules based on 5 competencies of communication, building trust, facilitating change, developing successful teams, and leading through vision and values.
Yeah, Nate, if I can jump in here for a second, could you give us just kind of an example of what a next step or an action plan would be? Because I think a lot of people would be interested in the practical steps that people would take.
Very good. If a person basically said, if they found that they were marked low on accepting feedback, as an example, the individual would put an action plan together about, okay, we would give them some examples of things that they can do, like talking to employees better, sitting down with their boss, maybe getting a mentor, someone who could help them with that particular behavior. And then they would also, from accountability standpoint, put a plan together and say, I'm going to do X steps in the next 30 days. We also had them partner with someone at their debrief session so to help them with that accountability piece. A key piece with this is that it was not tied to the individual's performance management plan. It did not tie into any pay, anything like that, but it was all development. We also had an Office of Great Works Development that was there, where we had a resource library And we had books online, we had audio and videos online that they could use to help develop that particular behavior. And then we also developed those 10 modules that were made available free of charge to all the leaders that they could go to help develop a particular competency or improve particular behavior. And that was also based on where we were budgetarily. We just didn't have much money to go out and bring in consultants or set up, a high-powered training and development program. So everything that we did, we developed from within. And so, the leaders would say, well, we don't have time to do all this stuff. The budgets are cut, reducing staff. The governor and our managers are expecting a lot of things from us. So we don't have time to do all of that. So we said, okay, we'll work with you. And that's how we came up with the Behavior in the Box. The Behavior in the Box is a process that someone can use in a staff meeting, in a short, seminar or whatever, for 15 minutes, where we take the behavior and say they introduce the piece to the group. They have a hands-on exercise, and then they debrief and have some conversation and some self-reflection as to what did we learn within these 15 minutes. And we set up 36 of those modules, one for each of the behaviors that were identified in our 360 process.
Oh, thanks for answering that question, Nathaniel. Real quick, there is actually a hand raise button somewhere. I don't see that from my screen, but I believe everybody does. Is there any questions that you have about this Behavior in the Box or the action plan for Nate before he moves on that you might want clarified? It just seems like a very appropriate and poignant piece that people could use in a number of different workplace situations just because it's a 15-minute quick tutorial. It looks like Ron has a question. I'll unmute you here, Ron. You are unmuted.
Thank you. Now, I just sent one a few moments ago. The issue is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, the question is, when you provide all these materials, it comes across as though it is essentially the leader's responsibility to take all of the feedback and the information and then all of the action modules and materials and kind of do it on their own. Do you find that most of the leaders will do all of this by themselves and take advantage of those materials, or do they have to be prodded, or do you have a facilitator or someone else kind of check to see whether they're actually using any of this to improve their performance based on the feedback?
Great question. And that response is all the above. We set up a process where we had sort of dotted line relationships within all the departments, where we had agency administrators of the 360 process, but we also had facilitators that were available to individuals and to groups to help them walk through their own development. And so it's like it mostly was just we left leaders out there on their own, but for a plethora of resources available to audio, video, hard copy, as well as, face-to-face presentation.
Great. Any other questions? Just hit the hand icon and we'll take your question before Nate moves on. Okay, Nathaniel, let's move on, and we'll have more Q&A at the end of the presentation.
And as I said about the behaviors in the box, you can see here, those are the 5 leadership competencies that we focused on, and the 4 shared values, and all of the behaviors in the box supported these issues. Now, as an example of the behavior in a box, I don't know, we're going to provide you with a handout for a scenario. And I don't know if that happened or not. Did it? Did they get?
Yeah, we're gonna provide that to everyone after the presentation.
Okay. All right. So this is an example scenario: accepting feedback without becoming defensive, and we all have been in that situation before, where people provide feedback to us, but it's just human nature to get defensive about you know something that, as I said before, is a gift. So uh, you'll get these handouts, and what it is an article from um, author Elizabeth Larson, and she shared an experience she had with an employee where she ended up getting feedback from a worker who basically said that the manager would always take credit for everything that was going on and would never give credit to the employee. And when that person received that feedback, they basically said, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that." And for a minute, it caught that person off guard. What I provided with are some examples of what you would do and how would you respond to that in terms of receiving negative feedback. And there are two different ways. You can receive it in a positive way or you can receive it in a negative way. And we provide these tools to employees so they can see in terms of how to respond to negative feedback. As you can see here, we identify negative ways of receiving feedback. Defends personal actions, frequently objects to feedback given, verbally attacks the feedback giver, and turns the table. And we do that sometimes. Refute accuracy of the fairness of the feedback, not just in a work setting, in a political setting, in a community setting. We're not just talking about, on the job, feedback in the home from our kids and to our kids. Sometimes some of this occurs. You guys, the speaker, what the speaker is saying or the speaker's right to give the feedback. Who are you to give me that kind of feedback? You're not my mother. You're not my father. You're not my boss. So you have, we'll get to you that you can have, on your website some examples of the tools that we have, the behavior in the box. Now the passport piece, again, specific to Ron's question, we had each person develop a passport. Now a passport, if you traveled before, is something that you use to travel here and there and everywhere, and you get it stamped. And so this was sort of the accountability piece that we had with individuals. They needed to have their passport stamped to identify the things that they were doing in the particular areas that they wanted to improve. And so we thought that was a neat tool, for them to have. And then the other piece was also with the follow-up. As with anything, I can't motivate you, I can inspire you, but you have to be motivated to take action. And the question is, you get this gift, so what are you going to do with that information? What are you going to do the next day, and the next day, and the next month? In conclusion, we basically say again that feedback is a gift. It should be viewed as a gift, and if others offer this gift to you, thank them, and that's what we try to do. And James Kudos and Barry Posner from the Leadership Challenge basically, view feedback as a gift, and we follow, that process with them, and we work with them also within the state of Michigan. We had them come in and do some facilitating and seminars for us. So, but overall, the 360 process, the leader is leader-centered. It involves all the employees. It involves stakeholders and customers, and it ties into our competency-based system as well as our value-based system. And then the bottom line, it's part of the alignment model that's tied to the mission and vision, of the organization. So, with that, we'll open it to questions.
Yeah, who has a question? Just please click the hand icon. It looks like Ron might have a question. I think I saw your hand go down and then up again. So if that's the case, I'm unmuting you, Ron.
Am I muted or am I on?
You're on now.
Okay. No, I had the button on lower, and then I took it off and pressed the button again. I've done a lot of work with the 360 in the last 5 years with physicians in a clinical context, and also measuring teaching performance in the university. And you mentioned, Nathan, earlier that you have the candidate, the leader, fill out the same scale that all of the individuals in the 360 complete. And one of the things that I have found to be kind of a really good icebreaker, and maybe you've done it the same way, trying to remember from the original applications in the books on the 360 whether this was done. But once the candidate fills out the scale, to match up their answers item by item against their score from the 360 in terms of a diagnostic profile of strengths and weaknesses, and whether they agree or disagree based on how they perceive their performance and how all of the others perceived their performance. Is that something that you systematically include at some stage in the process, so they are kind of really looking at from a more of an analytical standpoint than an ego perspective? Because taking criticism of any kind or any feedback is a major problem for most people that we have found. So kind of having them do kind of a pre-analysis and saying, well, you know, what do you see are your weaknesses and how do they compare to what others have identified, seem to be extremely useful in having them think through their strengths and weaknesses before you take any further steps. Have you done that kind of thing? Has that been a standard procedure at all, somewhere along the line?
Standard procedure. As I indicated in debrief session, when we provide them with a packet, they get a variety of comparisons. They get a comparison of their supervisor's scores. That's separate. And so they can see how they compare to what the supervisor is saying. They also get a breakdown of what their employees are saying, and then also they get a breakdown of what others, in terms of customers and stakeholders and peers, are saying. And then they get a combination review overall score as well. So they have all those different levels of review and comparison for them to take in consideration. As we know that sometimes, you know, I submit, depending on where you're working, the supervisor really only knows, you know, maybe a tenth or 5% of what you're really doing. Your employees and your customers and those people that you're working with from day to day, that probably gives you the most valuable feedback. So the answer is yes to that, Ron.
Very good. Hey, thanks, Ron, for that question. Let's go now to Simone. Simone, I'm unmuting you right now.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for doing this. For Kat and I, this comes just in time because we are trying to evaluate a leadership institute for a program that tries to give some leadership competencies for people who deal with who are outreach workers or social workers dealing with people with addiction. And it's a similar process in that they start with the 360, and then they make kind of an individual plan on the competencies that they want to work on. And our task, which is turning out to be very tricky, is how to evaluate this program. And I understand that these kind of things are tricky to evaluate. It's not often done. And yet, in terms of planning, you know, what to do for follow-up, how often to follow up, and to justify it to funders, we need to have some sort of metric to, you know, prove the value of this. Even though when I look at the training, it seems valuable and good, you know, good common sense.
Right. We conducted the 360 survey basically once a year to the individuals.
Okay.
And so they had data to compare from year to year. Doing it too much more than that, we found could be very, because it is time consuming too. As I said, you could get up to 100 plus people who will respond to your 360 feedback, and if they're one person and you may have 25 people who want you to respond, that is very time consuming. So we were very careful and concerned about that. But the key piece is having the developmental pieces attached to the 360 process itself. Because if you just do the survey and there's nothing else after that, then it's basically all not. And we also wanted to have a mechanism for people to respond to say if they saw improvement in that leader or not.
I'm sorry, it's really kind of hard to understand you. Are you saying that the survey is the same or it changes?
The survey is always the same.
Okay.
The survey is always the same. However, what a leader focuses on as a result of the survey may change.
Okay. As they master one competency, need to focus more on others.
Correct.
Do the same people are continuously asked to evaluate?
Yes and no, depending on what position the individual is in. If you have your same employee group reporting to you and the same supervisor, those individuals obviously continue to be the ones that respond.
Okay.
But from a peer group and customer stakeholder group, that could change.
Okay. Where does the 1 year come from? How did you figure out that was best practice?
Research.
Do you have any specific resources you can point me to about what are best practices in terms of evaluation?
I can get that for you.
That would be great.
Very good. It looks like Ron might have a question. Again, I think I saw your hand go down and then up again. So if you finished asking a question, please lower the hand. If not, raise it again. And I think I saw your hand go right back up, Ron. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm just doing some aerobic exercise with the computer thing here. So, sorry, my thing is always lower, and I press it, and then it goes up, and then it comes back down, so I'm sorry. Quick question in terms of any quantitative analysis. Given the observational nature of this, when you have the different groups of supervisors and peers and others do the ratings, have you done a reliability coefficient alpha estimates on each of those groups to determine their consistency and whether that is stable over time? And the second question is how you measure improvement in performance as a result of the entire process.
The answer to the first question is somewhere in the middle. We had a group of researchers review the entire process, but not necessarily specifically for each responding group. So I think you were asking the question: did we do differently for supervisor response, for peer stakeholder response, and for employee response?
Because you probably you'd expect more consistency and stability within groups of the same category than you would across groups. So that would be probably a starting point. And if the N is large enough, that would probably be your best estimates for reliability, rather than combining all the groups who are above, below, and at the same level as the leader.
All right. And what was the last part, second question?
Whether you have any hard measures or whether you're doing any quantitative analysis of the improvement in performance that might result from the entire process, the payoff.
We did a follow-up survey of leaders, and we actually had them, respond back to us in terms of the areas that they saw improvement and how the process impacted them. And then we even put together a video of those individual leaders responding to the participation in the results of their participation. So yes, we do have a hard data.
Are there any other independent measures of performance?
No other independent measures.
Okay.
As I said before, we did not pay, and we did not tie it to personnel decisions. It was basically a developmental. It's basically a developmental tool for that individual.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Just raise or lower hands. Do whatever. One quick question. It looks like Simone's hand has gone right back up, but I'll jump right in. Nathaniel, if I remember correctly, you're about to record a series of videos of additional content about 360-degree feedback and all of that for a different website. I don't know if you want to mention anything about that or not before we take Simone's question.
No, not at this time.
Okay, and we won't mention that then. But there's a lot of stuff, a lot more stuff where this came from, just for everybody's benefit. Let's take Simone's question.
Yeah, I understand that, other than self-reporting, it is very hard to get other measures of performance. But how do you justify your training? How do you say what is good and not so good about training? And also, leadership, I just don't think it can be done in one shot. So I was wondering what your insights were on follow-up. How often do you follow up, and what ways do you follow up on leadership competency training?
Right. Our own personal development is a journey, not a sprint. And so you're correct. And as I said before, each time we conduct the survey, each department had their own agency administrator who were responsible for monitoring leader performance and participation, and also developing their own development process for their agency. We had an organization with a central function that provided support and also resources for the various departments, but the department is responsible for their own follow-up. The behaviors in the box, the 10 learning modules that we have developed are available for people to sign up and go through. So that was there, on an ongoing basis for them to continue their development.
Is there any sort of best practices on how often to do follow-up, though?
How often to do follow-up?
Yeah.
Again, it's improvement of performance, depending on how severe, how specific the individual challenge is.
Mm-hmm.
In some situations, it might be 3 to 6 months, but it's going to take, a year, or depending on how often you try to improve in that area. Typically, it's been an annual process of review.
Thank you.
Because it also demands resources, as you said before.
Are you going to email us something, or there's some websites you can point us to?
I'll work with Nathan, and I'll get the material either to him on the or put on the website, or I can contact you directly.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we'll get all this material up on the website for you. Is there one more question before we shut down the recorder and get everybody up and running for your 1 o'clock appointments? Any further questions? I see Ron's hand is up again. Do you have another question, Ron?
Oh, no, I didn't touch anything. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I work with webinar training all the time, so that's like the #1 thing that I do is teach everyone to lower their hands again with that. So no problem at all. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead and ask a question. This is our last shot.
And it basically piggybacks on Simone's issue with how frequently this should be done. It's been my experience in the other applications with the 360 that if you want improvement in performance with leaders or anybody else, that for that specific purpose alone, it should be done, it seems like it should be done much more frequently than once a year, at least twice a year, if not more frequently, and perhaps with smaller groups in the 360 model rather than with the larger ends that you're using for the annual. The annual seems to make more sense as a performance appraisal mechanism to provide data overall for evaluation purposes, for merit pay or other kinds of decisions that might be made, but not necessarily for the specific improvement. So, you know, my tendency is to think that it should be done, and what I have seen is that for improvement, that it be done at least twice, if not more frequently, with smaller ends in terms of the model, because people, over a year, the number of things that happen and the changes that can occur when you just get one reading at one point in time from everybody, it really is not reflective, perhaps, of all the things that have changed or have occurred within a given time period. It's a pretty large chunk of time. So the applications in some of the other areas have done more frequent ones when the purpose is primarily for improvement of performance. So that's what I'd just like to throw in. The once a year seemed, you know, kind of restrictive for that purpose.
But also from an action perspective, if the person is working on something that's tied to their job, that can be measured where you can see the results, that would happen and occur more frequently than once a year as well. So think of that line.
Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for that additional comment. That's really helpful. What we're going to do now is actually shut down the recorder, and I thank everyone for coming. Nate and I will still be on the line for a few minutes if there are any further questions. Next month, we're going to have a special guest, Carolyn Santos, with us to talk about communication styles for leadership and the different languages, so to speak, of communication that there are out there and how to be able to make connections with other people as leaders through these languages. So join us. It's the first Thursday of the month at 12 noon, and we try to keep these webinars to about 30 to 45 minutes or so. So we're right on track with that. I want to, again, thank Nathaniel Lake here. Let's put his picture back up. And you can visit his website at brannonllc.com, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the correct website? All right, brannonllc.com. Nathaniel, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, and talking again.
Yes, we will.